Welcome to the Soulful Insights podcast. Before I begin, just want to let you know if you're enjoying this podcast or if you do enjoy it by the end, please consider donating at the coffee link to support my work and to support this podcast. I really appreciate all of the love and support that I receive from my listeners. So let's get into the topic today. And I know this can be a controversial topic, but this is something really near and dear to my heart. And this is something that was an experience of mine. And so I don't want to disrespect anyone or anyone's choices or anything like that at all. But I want to share my experience, and I also want to provide an alternative option or opinion. So what we're going to be talking about today is the illusion of the wife and mother identity. And to me, it doesn't matter if you are a stay-at-home mom, totally fine. But the issue is that your identity is not mother. It's part of who you are, but it is not an entire identity. And that's what we're talking about. And being a wife is a relationship status. It is not an identity in and of itself. And this is where we start to run into problems, is when we tell someone their entire identity is wrapped up in their relationship status as a wife or in being a mother. Okay? And that's the issue that I have. It's not about people's personal choices when those choices are made out of individual sovereignty. And we'll get into that later. So, high demand religions are notorious for creating this illusion that being a wife and mother is an identity in itself. And also that this identity is the only identity that a woman should have, ideally. Their ideal standard is your entire identity for the rest of your life is as a wife and mother. And that is what they create. But I want to break this down a little bit and show the absolute lunacy of the idea that your relationship status as a wife or mother can be an entire identity in itself. And as I said before, I am a mother. I was a stay-at-home mom. So I am in no way saying that there's anything wrong with being a mother or choosing to stay home if that is done out of individual sovereignty. But this can be a really slippery slope when it comes to high demand religions that are teaching little girls by the time they're 3 years old that this is the only acceptable path in life. And this is the highest thing that they should to achieve in their life. The most noble thing they could possibly do in their life. That's a slippery slope, because what I don't think women really understand is it isn't a sovereign choice necessarily if it's something that you've been taught since you were a child that should be your aspiration and goal in life. Because it almost creates this desire in you of like, yeah, that's what I want to do. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a mom, but we have to be really careful about the messages that we're receiving and if that's really truly who we were or are. And I bought into this hook, line, and sinker, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, and I loved it. And if you would have asked me when I was homeschooling my kids and I was a stay-at-home mom, I would have said, yes, I'm fulfilled. I'm happy. This is what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to be, until it all falls apart. And until the kids are all gone and you're only 43 years old and you don't know who you are anymore when it really hits the fan. And this can happen in a variety of ways. But this idyllic situation can become tragic, and it often does because we don't live in an idyllic world. So we cannot wrap our identity around relationships, okay? So let's look at this. What is the very essence of the word wife? At its very core, being a wife is just a relationship status. It just means that I've chosen to share my life with this person. And I've received a government certificate to verify my decision to spend my life with that person. That's all being a wife is. At its very fundamental core, that's all it is. Now, I realize religions have created an entire identity around it, and they've created roles, and they've created duties that you have to perform, they've made the word wife mean all kinds of things. But those are just thoughts and ideas that people have had. At its very core, it literally just is a relationship status that you've decided to share your life with someone. That is the only meaning that this word carries, nothing more, nothing less. You can add to that and make up whatever you want, but factually, that's all it is. So in the context of religion, this word has morphed into a full-on identity for women. And in fact, is really the only acceptable identity to have other than your second identity that they've created for you, which is mother. And we'll get into this one a bit later. In all Christian religions, and there are other non-Christian religions that do this as well, but in all Christian religions, they prioritize the Apostle Paul and his supposed letters over even the way that Christ spoke about and treated women. We look at Christ treating women. The very first time that he tells anyone that he's the Messiah, it's a woman. The very first person that sees the resurrected Lord is who? A woman. And Mary was the apostle to the apostles. She was the one sent to give them the message that he's been resurrected. You look at his elevated status. I want to tell you something. So you know the Mary and Martha story. Most of us do. If you're not Christian, you probably know the story anyway. If you don't, this whole idea of Mary and Martha. Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus and she is learning from him. And Martha is running around the house cleaning and doing stuff. And Martha chastises Mary for sitting at Jesus's feet. And why don't you get up? She's chastising her because what people don't understand is in ancient Jewish culture, only a man was allowed to sit at the feet of a rabbi as a disciple. That was a man's station that Mary was sitting in. And so Martha wasn't just being like, hey, come and help me. Martha was also, in a sense, saying, Mary, you're not supposed to be doing that. That's a man's station to be learning from a rabbi or a religious leader. And what does Christ say? Leave her alone. So what we see in Christ's behavior in a Christian context is he's elevating the status of women. He shouldn't have been talking to that Samaritan woman at the well for a variety of reasons, but he does. And not only does he do that, he announces that he's the Messiah to her, a woman. Women were the ones that were paying for his ministry. There were all kinds of women. There were women deacons in early Christianity. Did you know that? You probably didn't know that. There were women leaders of churches. There were women apostles. There were all kinds of things going on. And then Paul shows up on the scene and we lose a lot of this, okay? Christians weaponize these supposed letters from Paul that were written to very specific groups of people for very specific reasons, and they create meaning to them and make blanket beliefs about what it means to be a woman and a wife. Even 2,000 years later, it's like these supposed letters, which the reason I say supposed is because Bible scholars know that many of these letters were not written by Paul, but they're still canonized and they're still weaponized against women anyway. Even though it was never intended to be used by people 2,000 years later to subjugate women, and yet that's what we're doing. Now, I find it really interesting because Christians supported and justified slavery because of their scriptures, which included Paul's letters. They justified slavery using the Bible. And now that we recognize that subjugating other people and slavery of other people, enslaving people is wrong. We understand that that is morally wrong. So we now claim that the Bible doesn't support slavery, and we do all these mental gymnastics around slavery now. However, the subjugation of women continues to be perpetuated. They've even created biblical womanhood out of this now. And the reality is biblical womanhood has nothing to do with the Bible. Like literally nothing. They take a couple of statements out of the Bible, some of which we know were not made by Paul even. We don't even know who wrote them. And they've created an entire identity for women out of this. The subjugation of women continues to be perpetuated with reckless abandon. And any woman who dares to challenge the misogyny is labeled as selfish, a deceiver, deceived by Satan. She's not a true Christian. She's a Jezebel. And the list goes on and on and on. If you don't want to be submissive and subjugated to your husband, you are going to be called all sorts of names. The man is not prideful for wanting to lord authority over you, but if you don't like that, you are. You may believe that I don't know anything about Christianity. Who am I to talk about this? Well, if you listened to my first podcast, you'll know that I grew up in a very patriarchal, high-demand religion. And then when I left that religion, I went to ministry school and I became a commissioned pastor. So I do, in fact, know exactly what Christian doctrine is. And it was excruciatingly painful to go through ministry training as a woman. And I almost quit many times because the misogyny was horrific. And here's the thing. They don't teach this stuff over the pulpit. I mean, they do. Women are supposed to be submissive to their husbands. The husband is the authority in the home, this type of stuff. But they kind of try to soften it and whatever. But the doctrine is very clear. So I want to give you an example of what I was taught in ministry school. So I was in a pastoral counseling class, and we were being taught about marriage counseling as a pastor in this class. And the professor of this class, I want to be very clear, is nationally known. He has a PhD. He speaks all over the country. He's a professor at a very prestigious school. So this is not just some random Joe Schmo off the street, okay? This man is very influential in the Christian world, okay? He explained to us that there is only one reason for divorce given in the Bible, and that is adultery. That's it. He went on to say that he has a lot of questions from students. Well, what do we do if a woman comes to us and she's the victim of domestic violence? And he says, the answer is very simple. Domestic violence is not a reason given to us in the Bible for divorce, and therefore you should counsel her against divorce. What? I was sitting there flabbergasted. He says you are to counsel her that if she feels like she is in too much physical danger that it might end up requiring medical attention, she can separate from her husband until he can resolve his anger issues with the Lord. If he is unable or unwilling to stop the violence, she is to remain married and separated from him for the rest of her life. But she is not to be counseled to get divorced because the quote in Christianity is God hates divorce. I heard that 100 million times during school. She is to live alone for the rest of her life, but she's not supposed to get divorced. And I just thought, what is this? This is exactly what I was taught in ministry school. And you might think, oh, well, you went to ministry school in the 1990s or the early 2000s. It's not like that anymore. No, it was a few years ago. We're talking 2020s. This is what's being taught. And this is what is believed by a lot of your pastors, regardless of what, not all of them, I didn't say all. This is what is believed by a lot of pastors out there, a lot of them. It's not something that's widely publicized. It's not like they're going to go publicize that they believe this, but you go in to get counseling from them, this is what you're going to hear. You're not going to hear it on the sermon on Sunday. But this is the fundamental doctrine of Christianity. If you're a Bible-believing Christian, this is what the Bible says about divorce. Now, this isn't what Jesus meant when he said this, but this is what they've made it mean. Okay? This was an entirely different thing. But what happens is they pick little verses and little quotes and little things out of the Bible and they make it mean whatever they want. Christ wasn't saying this is the only reason you should get divorced. You could be allowed to get divorced. And plus he was talking to men anyway. But that's beside the point. This is what's being taught. So moving on to more Christian doctrine about women. Now remember, a lot of this stuff comes from letters that we know for a fact were not written by Paul. The rest of them that were These are being taken wildly out of their first century context. And that's the biggest problem that we face, is that there's a huge misunderstanding of some of the Greek words that were used. There's just a million misunderstandings that have allowed men to create this doctrine. Women are to remain silent in the churches. Women are to be taught by their husbands in the home. Women are easily deceived, and therefore the husband must be the decision maker in the home, because Eve ate the fruit. All women on the whole planet forever and ever and ever, for however long the world is here, they're all easily deceived. And if a woman is allowed to lead a family or make a decision for a family, their family will be led to destruction, because she will follow Satan. She will be deceived by Satan, and her family will be led to destruction. True fact. Well, true belief. Sorry, not a fact. This is ridiculous. But a woman must be in subjection or submission to her husband, and a woman is not allowed to teach a male over the age of 11. And the list goes on. This is not it. So when you look at this, this is high demand religions, the majority of them, the majority of Christianity in the United States. These are their fundamental doctrines. A woman's primary role in life, primary identity in life, is as a wife and a mother. And part of that is she's not supposed to be teaching males over the age of 11. She's supposed to be in submission to her husband. There's a woman, I'll tell you this, another class that I took on women's ministry, learning about women's ministry. There's a woman, and she speaks all over the U.S. She's a Christian, and she does seminars all over the U.S. And I'm not going to say her name. And people would think, oh, she's an empowered woman. Look at her. She's teaching sermons all over the U.S. Well, hold up a minute. Let me tell you something about this woman. I was taught that this is what I needed to do if I wanted to ever speak in public. I was taught this in my ministry school classes, okay? As a woman, if I wanted to give a seminar, I am under submission to my husband and to my pastor. And so to whatever church I go to, I'm under submission of those two men. Always. They are my spiritual authorities. So this woman, when she writes her seminar, then she gives it to her husband, and he prays over it and reads it. And if there's anything in there that he wants her to change, or he doesn't want her to say, or he wants her to say differently, she has to be in submission to him, and she has to change it in whatever ways he says. And then it goes from him to her next spiritual authority, which is the pastor, who then does the same thing. And she has to be in submission to whatever he wants. And if he doesn't want her doing it, he doesn't want her teaching on this topic, she can't do it. So as you start to see, this can get really dicey and extremely oppressive of women. And I was taught that this is how we need to make sure that women are behaving if they are ever doing anything in a church capacity at all. So now we're circling back to the identity assigned to a woman at birth. High demand religions do not see being a wife as a relationship status. They've created an entire identity out of it. And they've also assigned duties that you must perform in relation to this identity that you have. So instead of it just being like what a normal person would think, it's a relationship status that I've chosen to enter into of my own free will and choice to choose this person to be my partner in life. No, that's not what it is. It's your identity. And in submission to your husband, you do the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry and the ironing and the mopping and the housework and serve your husband. This is your identity. This is your lot in life. A husband can help you if he decides he wants to, but it's not his, quote, gender role. And therefore, if the husband never does cooking, cleaning, laundry, ironing, he never does any of it, it's fine, because that's not his role. It's your identity. Some men will help and some won't, because they see it as a woman's work. I see that as life skills. I have a son who has moved away. He has his own apartment. Guess what? He cooks, he cleans, he does his own laundry. Those are just part of living life. You dirty the clothes, you eat the food, you make the messes. We all just help clean up. This is not This is not a gender role. These are life skills. I don't know why we came up with this, but this is what they've done. So this is your aspiration in life, to be a good, submissive wife. That's what it is. They've created roles for the husband, but interestingly, the role of husband isn't an identity. So when you have 3-year-old little boys in their little children's ministry classes or whatever on Sunday, they're not telling them that their greatest aspiration is to be a husband. You're going to be a husband one day, and you're going to do all these things for your wife, and that never happens. The role of husband is never made an identity for men. It's a relationship status for them. It doesn't come with any of that, which I find really interesting. But the husband's, quote, gender roles in marriage is composed of things they would do anyway, if they were single or if they're married or not. But then their other role is to exercise power and authority over other people, which I find ridiculous. So they're to provide for their family, they're the head of the household, and they're the spiritual leader in the home. Guess what? He would have a job and make money and provide for himself whether he was married or not. He would still have a car. He would still have a house. He would still buy food. He would still have money to spend. That's no different. Providing is ridiculous because he would do it anyway. If his aspiration was that he wanted to be a lawyer, he would be that anyway. He would make that same amount of money. If his aspiration is to be a garbage man, then that's what he would have in his life, whether he was married or not. So the idea of being a provider is kind of a moot point because he'd be making money no matter what. The head of the household and the spiritual leader. So basically, there's no service there. It's just, they call him, but benevolent patriarchy calls him a, quote, servant leader. They've changed. I'm like, do you know what? I've never seen in the Bible the word servant leader before. Interesting. But they've created that so that women don't get so upset about it, right? But notice how his role is either to make money, which he would do anyway, and then the rest of his role is power and authority over his wife and children. So it's interesting to me how a woman's identity is wrapped up in being a wife, and she literally sacrifices everything and devotes her entire existence to serving him. She has no job. She doesn't make any money. She doesn't do anything other than cook and clean and serve him. And yet his role is to exercise authority over her and provide basic necessities, which he would do for himself anyway. And then a woman who doesn't like this setup, she's the one that's prideful. This is where this gets really dicey when you say someone chose this. I chose to be a stay-at-home mom. Did you, though? Or were you taught from the time you could walk that was what you were supposed to do? The other thing that benevolent patriarchy has kind of started infiltrating this, because women have clearly, obviously not liked this. So they say that he should be kind to her. And that is in the Bible, I get that. But a lot of men aren't. But that's about the only unique thing in his role that he wouldn't do if he was single, is that he's supposed to be nice to his wife. He's supposed to be kind about it. I mean, you have power and authority over her. You're her spiritual leader, but you should be nice about it. Men are never taught that their aspiration in life should be to be a husband and a father. That's like a part of the deal. It's like you go to college, you get an education, you have a career, you have hobbies, you have all these things in your life, and you're going to be a husband and father. But nobody ever tells them that that's their main priority, is to be a husband and a father above everything else. They say, oh, well, we prioritize that over everything. Well, no, you don't. A woman does, you don't. They are free to pursue any hobby, any interest, education, or career that tickles their fancy. Is that the same for a woman? No. So when you say he should prioritize his family over his career or whatever, he does not do that on the same level as a wife and mother does. It doesn't even compare. If a man wants to train to run a marathon after work, it's good because he needs a hobby and he works hard to provide for his family and he needs a break. But if a wife wants to train for a marathon after her husband gets home from work, she's selfish and she's not sacrificing for her husband and children because her identity is as a wife and mother. Do you see how this works? When it's not your identity to be a husband and father, it's okay to have a hobby because you work hard. Men are praised for working hard and providing for a family, which is something they would do for themselves anyway, so they shouldn't be being praised for it. But a wife gives up her entire existence to serve these people. And when he gets home and she wants a little bit of a break, she's selfish. It's because we've wrapped her identity up in being a wife and mother instead of that only being a part. His identity is who he is as a being. It's not his relationship status. Many Christian women claim this isn't reality because they, quote, work outside the home. And so they're like, yeah, no, I'm a Christian and I work outside the home and it's fine. Well, I think that's great. And I think it's wonderful that your home life is not dictated by biblical womanhood, but your religious life is. Are you allowed to be an elder at your church? Are you allowed to be a pastor at your church? Are you allowed to teach Bible study to men over 11 years old? If you're a women's ministry leader or children's ministry leader, are you allowed to autonomously make decisions in your position at church? Does your church believe the epistles of Paul to be the inerrant word of God? Because if they believe that the epistles of Paul are the inerrant word of God, the fact that you are, quote, allowed to work outside the home is a moot point. You're still, if those are the inerrant word of God, you are to be in submission to your husband. You are still to be silent. You go through all of those things. I hear far too many women tell me that they're not affected by the patriarchal culture because their husband, quote, let them go to college or let her pursue things that she wanted to pursue. Does anybody see anything wrong with that? Unfortunately, these women do not see anything wrong with this statement. In fact, I just heard a woman say this to me 2 weeks ago. No, the patriarchal culture of our high demand religion didn't affect me at all because my husband let me go to school and my husband let me, take classes I wanted to take. She literally didn't see anything wrong with saying that. But let me say something to you. If you didn't catch what was wrong with that statement, you are not a sovereign being if someone else has to let you pursue anything. The word let is the problem. And this is a thing I hear in Christian circles all freaking day long. But my husband lets me do this. But my husband let me go to college. But let me do this. That's not the same, honey. That's not the same. My sister is a relationship life coach, and she's absolutely phenomenal at what she does. She's booked out. She has to turn people away. So she has a lot of experience with this and has been doing this for years. And one day we were discussing the powerful patriarchal hold that men have in our society. And she told me that she's noticed some key differences between religious and non-religious women. And I found this really fascinating because she obviously, she coaches women on every end of the religious spectrum, from atheism to like extreme high demand stuff, where the wife is expected to literally take care of the husband almost like a mother. Like, she does everything. He won't even pick up an item of clothing off the floor, and also tells her that if she gains any weight at any point, he will leave her. Like, major stuff, okay? So what she found was women who were devout in a pretty high demand religion or in a Christian faith have several key similarities. They are not sovereign in the fact that anything that they do, their husband lets them do. They don't know who they are outside of being a wife and a mother. If they did get a degree, there is no plan to use it. It was just something to kill time until they got married. When she asked them what their favorite restaurant is, they answer, "Oh, my husband loves XYZ." She's like, "No, I don't care what your husband likes. Tell me what you like." "Oh, I never thought of that." When she asks what hobbies they enjoy, they don't know. Why? Because they don't have time for hobbies. They are too busy cooking, cleaning, running errands, running kids to soccer and ballet, and trying to get something on the table for dinner, changing poopy diapers. They don't have time for hobbies. Is the husband giving them space to take care of their own needs, to enjoy hobbies or friends or education or anything else? No, they don't have time. After a series of questions, it starts to become clear that these women don't know themselves and they don't have time for themselves. They don't know what they like. They don't even know who they are on a basic level. You're like, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? Well, I don't know. If you wanted to go back to college, what would you study? I don't know. They don't know who they are as an individual. They only know themselves as a wife or a mother. They'll be like, oh, I love my kids and I love being a mom. I know you love that, but who are you? Who are you? As a sovereign individual being, who are you? They don't know. So then we move on to the non-religious women. And when you ask them the same questions, they answer very succinctly, and they seem to know exactly what they like. They know what they enjoy doing. They do things with their friends. They have hobbies. Their husbands are a lot more engaged with housework. There's no guilt if she pursues friends or time away or hobbies or whatever. And they're far more secure in knowing who they are and what they want in their life. So if you ask them, what's your favorite restaurant? They'll be like, bam, they will tell you. If you were to, like, most of them have degrees, but those, if they didn't or don't have a graduate degree, what would you want to study? They can tell you. What hobbies do you have? Oh, I do X, Y, Z. Like, they know, they're like, oh yeah, I have hobbies. I do things. And I've seen this myself. I was a Pilates teacher for several years, and women would stay after and talk to me. And the women that were in really high demand religions were more soft spoken. Being at Pilates, there was a lot of guilt, being away from their families. Sometimes they would try to come in the middle of the day when the kids were at school, because we had like 10 or 11 a.m. classes. It was very, very, very different. Women lose themselves in this self-sacrificing culture. And let me tell you something. This is called self-abandonment. That is what this is called. It is where, and this is what high demand religions require, self-abandonment of women. It's not even just self-sacrificing. It's okay to sacrifice something for someone. When my daughter was 16 years old, she always loved us to come on her lunch breaks with her and visit with her and sit with her while she was on lunch break. And I know that's really crazy for a 16-year-old girl, but we had a really good relationship with our kids. And there were times where I was in the middle of a nap and my daughter would call, and it was her break in 10 minutes. And Mom, I want you to come and sit with me on my lunch break. And I am like exhausted. And so, you know what? I'm like, she's not going to be 16 for very long. And faster than I know, she's going to move out, grow up and move away. And I'm going to take advantage of the time to be with her. And I would drag my tired little self out of bed, freshen up a little bit, and I would run out the door to go spend time with my daughter. That is sacrificing for someone. That is saying, I would rather stay here in bed, but I love my child, and so I'm going to go and spend time with her. That's sacrificing for someone, and that is fine when that is your choice. That was my choice to do that. That's what I wanted to do for my child. Self-abandonment is when I don't know who I am, because my life has been laid out for me from the time I was 3 years old. That my ideal identity would be being a wife and a mother and cooking and cleaning and doing all of these things. That I don't even know what I would study. I don't even know what I would like to learn about. Learning is something for everyone. People are like, oh, I don't really care if I have a college degree. Well, it doesn't matter if you have a college degree. Learn. It's self-improvement. It's learning. It's being engaged in the world and learning about the things around you. And you will notice them, oh, I don't need a degree. And, I don't need to study, and you watch them. It's self-abandonment when you aren't exploring yourself and your interests and that part of you. Being a mother should be a part of you, not all of you. Being a wife is a relationship status. It's not your identity. And when you do that, you self-abandon. You do. You are a sovereign being. I am my own. That doesn't mean that I don't make sacrifices for other people or people that I love when I choose to do so, but no one should be telling me. The husband can spend any amount of money on his education because it's justified because he's the, quote, provider of the family, right? And this is what, in my high demand religion, this is what we were taught, like big time. You were supposed to support your husband through school, graduate school, whatever. You were supposed to support that. If you had to work to support him through graduate school, you just worked at a menial job just to provide what you could until he graduates, and then you go, quit your job. But the wife's education is deprioritized because she's not the provider of the family. Therefore, the justification for graduate school or spending very much money on an education just isn't there. And I've seen this time and time and time again where women, and I did this myself, I really, really, really wanted to go to graduate school. But it was constantly, it wasn't worth spending the money for me to do what I wanted to do because my husband was supposed to be the provider. Remember, we've set up these roles. They're not real. We created them in our culture and our society. They're not real. A woman could be a provider for a family just as well as a man could be, but we've created it this way. And so a woman's education is deprioritized. And I've seen so many women, I shouldn't spend. My daughter has been saying this because she grew up in this high demand religion. And yes, I feel a lot of guilt over that. But she's saying, he should be the one to go to graduate school because he's the one that's going to provide for the family. My daughter wants to be an occupational therapist really bad, and that's her dream. And I'm like, honey, go for your dream. But Mom, it's $70,000. Well, how much does his education cost? Like, it's constantly this, like, I have to give up on my dreams. I have to self-abandon. This is not okay. This is not okay. And that's just a little few examples of how men are prioritized over women in a patriarchal culture and how women are expected to self-abandon and identify themselves as a wife instead of being a sovereign being in themselves. In a religious culture where men are encouraged to pursue their sole purpose, their dream careers, their educational goals first and foremost, and their identity as a husband and father is considered only a part of what they do. It's not their entire identity. Whereas women are discouraged from pursuing outside goals, education, or any other purpose in their life. Their sole identity is wife and mother in these high-demand religions. And we see a loss of the powerful feminine. Women's identities are swallowed up in servitude, which is demanded of them. It isn't given willingly. It's demanded of them. They are taught from a young age that this is who you are. This is literally who you are. Any pursuit a woman makes outside of serving her husband and family is condemned and judged as selfish. This is because we've created an identity out of the word wife and mother. And if a woman does anything outside of that identity, we judge her. As women, we've demanded better treatment. And we've seen the emergence of benevolent patriarchy. Okay, well, we get it. Like the subjugation of women, that's a little harsh. So now we have benevolent patriarchy. Men are still prioritized and women are still relegated to servitude. But men claim that despite the fact that they are the head of the household and women are to submit to them, they claim that they will respect her. They claim that they will listen to her side of the story. I will listen. Ultimately, he has the choice. He's still the head of the household, but I'll listen to what you think and I will decide if I think it's valid or not. That's benevolent patriarchy. When you're in full-on patriarchy, it's like, it doesn't matter what you say. I don't even need to listen to you. I'm the head of the household. I'm the spiritual authority. What I say goes. Benevolent patriarchy says, I will listen to you. I will consider it, but I am still the ultimate decision maker. While on the surface, it might seem to solve the issues with male domination and control, but it doesn't even begin to undo the damage done to women by patriarchy. Women in patriarchal Christianity who are treated well by their husbands, who are given some say in decisions, or who have a degree from a university and feel, quote, supported by their husband, still suffer from a loss of self-identity, a loss of autonomy, a loss of knowing who they are, and a loss of their soul's purpose in this life. Why? Because the reality is, the taking care of whatever children they have is still falls squarely on her shoulders in benevolent patriarchy. So if she works, she's got to find childcare for the kids. It isn't the two of them working things out together. He can take care of them sometimes, she can watch. Like, they're not balancing. You're both equally parents. Those children are equally yours. A man that thinks he shouldn't have to change diapers or he shouldn't have to raise his children is an idiot. Those children are also yours, every bit as much as they are hers. And also, her education is still secondary to his. Her hobbies are still put on the back burner so that she can get the kids off to school. If she's trying to get kids off to school before she goes to work, she still has to clean the house. She still has to come home and run the kids from soccer and piano and ballet and get dinner on the table and get the kids in the tub and get them in bed at night. So in reality, if we try to still keep the same gender roles, but you're at work, you're freaking exhausted. Hubby can be out training for a marathon after work or going out for drinks with the buddies or whatever, traveling for work or whatever. You don't get that luxury. And if you try to do that, you're a failure. You're selfish. You don't realize that when you as a mom are getting everybody breakfast in the morning and getting them off to school before you go to work, and when you're running them around to all of their lessons and all of their things and getting dinner on the table and getting them in the tub and doing all of that and having a job, you're still in patriarchy. Unless your husband is getting his butt out of bed and making breakfast and getting kids off to school and helping with all of that stuff. You see what I'm saying? A lot of women don't even realize it because they allow their identity to be swallowed up in being a wife and a mother, even if they have a job. Show me a Christian man or a man from a high-demand religion who is willing to put his own higher education on hold so that his wife could pursue her dream. Because you will not see that in patriarchy. You won't see it. The man's education will be prioritized over hers every time. Even if she is highly intelligent and would change the world with whatever she was going to do, it's not going to happen because his is going to be prioritized. When has a Christian husband ever said, or a high-demand religion husband ever said, honey, I know that you have a dream about becoming a pediatric orthopedic surgeon since you were 5 years old, and I will put my law school on hold and support you through medical school and your residency. When has that ever happened from a man in a high-demand religion or benevolent patriarchy? It has not happened. It would never happen. And this is why I say benevolent patriarchy doesn't work. This woman could be an absolute, expert in her field, pioneer in the field of pediatric orthopedic surgery. She could have a sole purpose for changing some major, amazing thing in pediatric orthopedic surgery. But because of benevolent patriarchy, she might not ever be able to do that because she's not going to have a husband that would support her in doing so. And men don't see women as pioneers and things like that. They'll see you as being a pioneer and learning how to sew someone's clothes. Show me a Christian man willing to make that sacrifice. Show me a man from a high-demand religion or benevolent patriarchy that would be willing to make that sacrifice. Because they say, oh, they're servant leaders. They sacrifice for their families. You really don't sacrifice for your family. You have a job just like you always would. You make money just like you always would. And you also get to be the leader and the spiritual authority. Show me the sacrifice that you're making. Because maybe the only sacrifice is you don't have as much money to spend on yourself as you would. It's not much. They basically say men sacrifice by working to provide a home, food, and money, or whatever. That's not a sacrifice because you'd be working and making money anyway. Men from high-demand religions do not actually sacrifice for their families, but they're praised for having a job and, quote, providing for their families. That's the praise they get. While women are the ones sacrificing their entire life to take care of other people. They are carrying children inside of their bodies for 9 months. They are giving birth. They are cooking and cleaning and taking care of everything and everyone. And rather than being praised for this sacrifice, it's demanded of them and expected. And the minute she takes a moment for herself, she's selfish. This all sounds very noble and self-sacrificing of the woman. And women absolutely are noble and self-sacrificing, even though their husbands are no such thing. Because if you flip the script, you're not going to find a man that would be willing to do that in a high-demand religion. To sacrifice his dreams of his dream career, of his dream education, his hobbies, his things for changing poopy diapers. I want to see a man from a high-demand religion that will do that. So let's fast forward a little bit so we can get a sense of what happens when this all melts away. Being a mother who is actively raising children is temporary. And that's another reason why it's dangerous to create an identity out of this. What happens when you're 42, 45, or 48 years old and all the kids are gone? So let me tell you a story about a woman that I know that found herself in just this situation. She grew up in a very high demand religion, being a wife and a mother. And that was being a wife and a mother was the only acceptable path for her to take. And that's what she was taught throughout her entire life. When she was 12 years old in church, she and the other 12 and 13-year-old girls were writing lists of what they wanted in a husband. They wanted him to have a sense of humor. And I mean, we're 12 and 13. You really think we knew what we wanted? We talked about being a wife. We were like practicing changing diapers. We were making little babysitting kits. Okay? She did go to college. She didn't take it seriously because she knew she wanted to be a mother and she wouldn't be working outside the home anyway. She married at 19 years old, had her first child at 22 and her second child at 25. Adopted a third child years later. She immersed herself in being a wife and mother. Homeschooled her children. She didn't really think anything about anything other than cooking, cleaning, and teaching her children. And she fully believed that she was fulfilled in her life, that she was happy, and this is what she would have chosen for herself. Reality check, though, in high school, she wanted to go to medical school. And when she was in her 20s and she had some health issues that the medical community couldn't help with, she discovered alternative medicine and she wanted to be a naturopathic doctor. But she never pursued that because she needed to be a wife and a mother. So fast forward to when she's 44 years old and her children were all grown up and moved away. Her husband goes off to work at 8 a.m. and the house is empty and quiet. There's no one to take care of. There are no messes to clean up. There are no children to raise or teach, and the house is eerily silent. She still has 26 years of her life ahead of her that she could have a career before retirement age. And yet she has no education, no job experience. She sacrificed everything for her kids and her husband. But in reality, there's no gratitude, no appreciation. They move away. They live their own lives. And she's left sitting in an empty house. As the days go by, she wonders, who am I now? What purpose does my life have now? I'm just sitting in an empty house. She starts to go through an excruciatingly painful identity crisis in her life. She had allowed her identity to be swallowed up in being a wife and mother, and now at 44 years old, she has no idea who she is anymore. She isn't raising children, and her husband is at work, so there's very little to do. All the laundry and house cleaning is done by 9 a.m. And then there's only deafening silence and loneliness. She doesn't have a degree. Her only job history was 25 years ago. She is now only qualified for the same job as a 16-year-old who just got a driver's license. There's nothing that prepares a woman for the day when she finds herself in this situation. This is the tragic reality of women who allow religious zealots to sell them on the illusion that being a wife is an actual identity in and of itself. That being a mother is the highest calling she can ever hope to achieve. They just fail to mention that being a mother is temporary and comes to a screeching halt one day. They don't tell you the stories of women whose husbands died at the age of 30. And I'm speaking of a woman I know, by the way. This is not just theoretical. A woman whose husband died at the age of 30, literally walking down the hallway and just dropped dead right there at 30-something years old, leaving her with 3 children under the age of 5, no education, no job, no life insurance, and no way to support herself and her children. They don't tell you the stories of women stuck in the throes of domestic violence with no escape because she has no education and no job experience to fall back on, and therefore has no ability to provide for herself or her children. They don't tell you the story of a woman who has 5 children, is in her mid-30s, and finds out that her husband has been living a double life when she's diagnosed with multiple STDs and she's left destitute, struggling to support herself and 5 children. The reality is, in this world, there are no guarantees, and selling women on this idyllic life of submission to her husband and donning the identity of wife and mother is damaging on so many levels, it's criminal. Being a husband and a wife is a relationship status. It is a choice to be partners for life. It is not an identity for either the man or the woman. It is a joining of their lives in equal partnership. And each partner should be valued equally. They should support each other's dreams and aspirations. Cooking and cleaning are not gender roles. They are life skills. She is not your mother. She is your partner. So clean up after your damn self. You are an adult. You don't need to be babied, and you can clean up after your own damn self. You are both parents. They are the man's children every bit as much as they are the woman's children, which means taking care of the children is an equal responsibility, not a gender role. So I want to tell you how this works when a woman is truly being treated unequal, when partners, a husband and a wife, come together as partners and they work together as partners. So I met this woman who worked at a spa where I received treatments at this spa. And she was not raised in a high-demand religious environment. And the way that she and her husband worked together to create a life was absolutely amazing to me. And it was mind-blowing at the time because this was before I had gone through a major faith transition. And I was always sold on this idea that, you know, the woman is the mother and she takes care of the kids at home and the husband works, and how this is all supposed to work. And then I saw how much more beautiful it was when it was an equal partnership and both partners just dive in and do whatever they can do to take care of the kids and the house and each other. And it was just beautiful. So anyway, they met when they were in 7th grade, and they dated off and on through junior high and high school. And of course, after that long of a relationship, she became pregnant their senior year of high school. And they were in love, and they had planned to get married anyway. So they just decided, okay, we'll get married and we'll figure out how to support ourselves. So what I loved about this is they worked out their schedules. So she immediately, during her pregnancy, started going to nursing school, but clearly she wasn't going to finish before the baby was born. And so, you know, she dives in, she gets her GED, she just takes the GED, so she's done with high school, so she can just dive into nursing school. And they worked out their schedules once the baby was born, so one of them was always home with the baby. So they were working very opposite schedules. Like, he's working night shifts and she's going to school and you know, working during the day, and they're working this out. And if their schedules ever didn't quite work, one of the grandmas would step in and watch the baby. So this baby was being taken care of by both parents and, you know, grandmas if need be. And when I met her, they'd been married for 17 years at this point. And she had worked as a nurse, and he worked, I don't know what he did, but obviously she didn't tell me, but he worked in his career, and they raised their children together. They planned their schedules when the children were little. They had 2 children, by the way. They planned their schedules so that when the children were little, either mommy or daddy was always home or grandma helped out. And then when both the kids were in school, they were over 5 years old, they just both worked and somebody was always there for the kids. And whoever got home, they were doing the household chores or cooking, either one of them running the kids around to practices and games and all of that. That is what a true marriage is two people that unify together and support each other and live their lives together. It's not mom that takes care of the kids. It's the both of them. This is how it should be. No one should have to sacrifice their entire identity, hopes, and dreams while the other one lives life as normal, expecting the wife to serve them and just accept a roof over her head and food on the table as his ultimate contribution. When a man steps up and takes his responsibility with the children and says, hey, I work these hours, you work these hours, we work this out. You can also work it out with family members or grandma or whoever, but it needs to be that we're supporting each other and we're working this out together. Nobody has a certain specific anything. It's just two people working their lives out together. We as a society need to support women and empower them to pursue their dreams and passions equally. Women need to stop living life from the sidelines while their husband pursues every hobby, career, or dream he wants to fulfill, while she feels that her only lot in life is servitude. Many women claim they want this, and maybe some of them do. But one day when those kids are gone and hubby's at work and you're sitting in an empty house, and the thing is you think, oh, I'll probably enjoy it. Yeah, well, when you have toddlers, you will. But they grow up. You're not changing poopy diapers right before they leave. They're not throwing tantrums. I enjoyed my teenagers, actually. We had a great time with our teenagers, and that may not always be the case, but you might enjoy it for a moment. If you had a rough teenager, you might enjoy it for a moment, but eventually you'll realize that none of this was an identity, and now you have to figure out life at almost 50 years old. That's what you're going to figure out in the end. That none of it, being a wife and a mother, was not an identity. If your husband up and leaves you one day, you're going to figure out that being a wife is not an identity. And you're going to have to figure out life by yourself now. If your husband passes away when you're in your 40s, you're going to figure out that being a wife is not an identity. It's a relationship. And that relationship can change at any moment. It could mean divorce. It could mean he dies. It could mean all kinds of things. It can't be an identity because it is not always permanent. Children aren't permanent either. Your identity is made up of the whole of who you are. Your personality, your talents, your desires, your passions, your hobbies, your unique soul expression. Being a mother is part of who you are. But it's not all of it. Being a wife is just a relationship status. That's not even part of your identity at all. As a woman, you can choose to never be married. You can choose not to have children. There are many, many choices, and all of them are valid. Your identity as a human being is not dependent upon your relationships in life. There are women that I personally know that were never able to have children, and what everyone tells her is you can adopt. Yeah, that is an option. But why is that the only option that we go to? Why can't she decide to become an engineer? Why can't she go to law school? Why can't she go to medical school? Why can't she become a rocket scientist? Why can't she become a geneticist? Why can't she become a marriage and family therapist? Why is the only option that if it is determined that she's infertile or she and her husband or whatever cannot have children, why is the only option that she adopts? It's because we've made motherhood an identity. You're a woman, you got to be a mom. No, you don't. If she wants to, great, do that. But stop telling women that are unable to have children that they need to go adopt. Or the other thing that I hear being told to women all the time is, you could be a school teacher. You could take care of other people's children. But why is that the only option? Why is that what we think women always have to be? Not all women are nurturers. Not all women are very good with children. And that's okay. Because their sole purpose in life is probably something else. And that's okay. Being a mother is not an identity. It's not a requirement. It needs to be a decision that is made by each individual, if that is for them. Marriage is also an individual thing. It's not an identity. It's a relationship that you choose, and you choose the partner that you want to live your life with, and that is a personal choice. Or you choose not to ever do that, and that's also valid. We need to stop putting identities on people that were never meant to be that, because we are causing a lot of harm. Self-abandonment. And a lot of women don't even realize it because they're not awake to it. They live their life in utter servitude, and they're so far buried in dirty diapers and tantrums and running kids around to soccer and ballet and whatever else they're doing. They don't even have a chance to sit down and think of who they are. And marriage should be a partnership all the way around. Husband shouldn't be throwing his clothes on the floor, leaving his toothbrush out, spilling milk on the counter when he makes his cereal in the morning, and walking out the door and thinking you're supposed to pick up after him. I am not your mother. This is what happens when we have men that think that cleaning a house is a gender role instead of life skills. Women are picking up shoes off the floor, clothes off of the floor. He's splattered toothpaste all over the bathroom sink and mirror when he brushes his teeth, and he never gives it a second thought because he doesn't think it's his responsibility to clean up after himself. He literally sees you as a maid. These are not gender roles. This was something created by a society and created by a very patriarchal society. We would look at a woman as being absolutely ridiculous if she's throwing her clothes on the floor and making messes all over the house and walking out the door and being like, that's a you problem. Right? She's a jerk if she does that. But if a guy does that, we're like, yeah, like, you're the wife. You're supposed to do that, right? That's your gender role. There are women out there that are absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to leave you with this. Something that I learned. Albert Einstein. You know, we all know him. Household name. Brilliant. But I bet there's something you didn't know. Look up Albert Einstein's wife. They weren't married for very long. There are a few years in there. But I want you to look up Albert Einstein's wife. And the reason I want you to look her up is because she was smarter than he was. Albert Einstein's greatest discoveries in whatever scientific fields he was looking in or working in, his greatest accomplishments were during the years that he was married to her. And when that marriage ended, there were no more amazing discoveries that were made or done. And what a lot of people have said was she was smarter than him. But the world would not have accepted her work because she was a woman. And so his name is on it. But it was hers. And this is what I want to tell you. There are immensely intelligent women out there who could change the world with their knowledge, their talents, their gifts, their abilities. But they're sitting at home being told that their only role is to pick up after their husband, wipe up his spilled milk, and do his laundry. And we are missing out on the brilliance of women because we've relegated them to an illusion of the identity of being a wife and a mother. And I will leave you with that. I appreciate you listening to this podcast. I know this can be a really tender thing for a lot of people, very controversial, but it's very close to my heart because I've experienced this myself. I've experienced the identity crisis that comes with being in your early 40s and all your kids are gone and you don't know who you are anymore. And I looked back at it was me. I wanted to become a naturopathic physician, and I'd wanted it all my life. And I never pursued it. And when the kids were gone, it was extremely painful that I did not pursue that. I would have to go back almost to the beginning. I have like 12 credit hours of college. I would have to go back and redo my bachelor's degree. I would have to redo everything in order to go. So I would be in school for 8 years in order to do that. And so it was just a lost dream. And I don't want anyone else to have to suffer through that because someone else told them what they were supposed to be and someone else told them what their identity needed to be. If that's not you, great. But I think that message needs to be out there. And yes, I did go to school. And yes, I did become a commissioned pastor, and I did some things. But the hard reality also was once I became the Christian commissioned pastor, I didn't want to be one. Because I had no idea what the fundamental Christian doctrines were. And when I had to read them and when I had to learn them and when I had to listen to their beliefs about women, I wanted to throw up. And so I felt like it was a waste. So I just want women to feel like they can be who they were meant to be in this world. And I hope that this was helpful for some of you. I hope that I just felt like this was meant for someone to hear, that there was someone out there that needed to understand this. And I hope that this has touched someone's heart. And I appreciate you staying to the end, and I hope to see you next time.